Today we're going to be checking out the successor to the Orient Mako 2, which should probably be called the Orient Mako 3, but the naming can get a bit confusing when it comes to these Orient watches. Anyways, this is an exciting release because the Orient Mako 2 was pretty much the best value in affordable dive watches for a long time, but it's been in need of a refresh for a while. Everyone expected that Orient would give us that sapphire crystal in the refresh maybe a couple years ago, but instead they released the Kamasu line of watches, and I picked up a very cool JDM exclusive colorway for this watch, so I'm excited to show that to you as well. Let's take a quick look at it and then we'll get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave. I live in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. And living in Japan does have its perks with some things, especially when it comes to getting watches from Japanese brands. I was able to pick up this Japan-only exclusive colorway from Orient from their website and was able to get it in pretty quick. I think a lot of the watches are still rolling out to other parts of the world, so it was nice being able to get it a little bit earlier. Now, I know for a lot of you guys, this is going to be kind of an excruciating thing because this is actually a really cool colorway, and if you don't live in Japan, it's probably going to be fairly hard to track down. But if you're interested in the Orient Mako 3 in general, this review will also have you covered. There are other colors that will easily be available worldwide, and this review should tell you pretty much everything you need to know if you're considering one of those. Now again, it's kind of hard to figure out what exactly to call this watch. I guess the Orient Mako 3 is the most appropriate name for it. It has the Mako 2 dial and handset, and it's got a similar size to the Orient Mako 3. Probably the most important thing is that it does now come with a sapphire crystal, which is what everybody's really been wanting from Orient. But in looking at this design, really what you have is you have an Orient Kamasu, the exact same watch as the Kamasu that came out a few years ago. It has the exact same case and bracelet as the Kamasu. It has the same bezel as the Kamasu. Really what's been swapped around here is you're getting a different bezel insert, a different dial, and a different handset. And while that may not sound particularly exciting, the Orient Kamasu is one of the best affordable dive watches out there. So to see some new options for it, a little bit of a refresh, is actually kind of a cool thing. And the overall dial layout and design that they've implemented here is based directly off of the Mako 2 diver, which for a long time was Orient's most popular affordable dive watch design. Compared to the Kamasu, I feel like this design is a little bit more casual, a little bit more fun. It features oversized Arabic numerals at 12, 6, and 9, a framed day-date complication at 3 o'clock, and pointed batons at every other hour. And paired with this dial is a sword-shaped handset with a second hand that has an orange arrow on the tip of it. Now, this particular limited edition colorway that I'm looking at today is available only from the Orient Japan website. It has a few key differences from the standard releases that we'll also be talking a little bit about later on in this video. Most obviously is the color scheme. This one has a gradient dial, so it starts with a bright orange in the center of the dial and then fades to black at the edge, and then the bezel has kind of a matching color scheme that is both orange and dark gray. And the use of bright, fun colors is something that I think really defines these new Mako 3 releases. They tend to feature brighter and more vibrant colors, and I think that, again, helps to differentiate it from the Kamasu line, which overall has a more dressy and classic feel to it. Other differences on this limited edition version, this one has a train track chapter ring instead of the minute indexes that you'll find on the other models. And the second hand on the limited edition is not loomed, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, but on the standard models, the arrow is loomed. And I'm not sure why they left the second hand unloomed. It kind of goes against dive watch conventions. A true dive watch is supposed to have a loomed second hand, which allows you to see if the watch is running or not in any lighting condition. But it is worth noting that the previous Mako 2s did not have a loomed second hand, so I'm happy to see that they included it on the standard versions of the Mako 3, but I wish they would have put it on this limited edition as well. But back to the dial for a minute here. I think they did a really good job with the numerals and the batons. They look very sharp and crisp, very defined against that background. They look almost pure white with only a hint of a metallic outline around the edges. It gives a lot of contrast and legibility and just gives it a very high quality look. Another thing that's interesting about these markers is that they are very shallow. They don't look like very high, thick applied markers. There's just a tiny bit of depth to them, and given the sharpness, I think they must be applied. And overall, I like the look. I think it is an improvement from the kind of softer, more rounded markers that the previous version of the Mako had. The case is identical to the Komatsu. It's a classic looking dive watch case with high crown guards that almost completely envelop the crown. And while that does offer a lot of protection to the crown, it does make it a little bit difficult to access as the crown is a little bit on the small side. I had the same complaint with the Komatsu, and this one doesn't make any updates to it. The rest of the case features flowing curves and kind of softer beveled edges. Rather than getting sharp edges and angles, you're getting a lot of curves and sort of smoothed out edges. Finishing is very simple with some radial brushing across the top of the lugs and then polishing everywhere else. And sealing everything in, you're getting a closed case back that's very basic. The watch case is 42 millimeters across, but the bezel is only about 40 millimeters and the lug to lug is about 46 millimeters. So it both looks and wears smaller than you would expect a 42 millimeter watch to. These dimensions are another reason why the Komatsu has been so popular. It's a very easy watch to wear regardless of your wrist size. But one thing that I'm not too big a fan of is the bracelet that's included with this watch. Again, it is exactly the same bracelet that came on the Komatsu. The watch features 22 millimeter lugs, so it has a fairly beefy bracelet to fit into that. The links are kind of on the large side, and there's not really a lot of taper to the bracelet. And to me, visually, it just looks a little bit too fat. I think the quality is acceptable for this price range. You are getting hollow end links and a stamped clasp, but the individual links are solid and pretty well made, and the bracelet is comfortable on the wrist. I didn't get any hair pulling or anything like that. Sizing could be a bit of a challenge given the size of each individual link. You might have a hard time fine-tuning it. It is sort of offset by the fact that the clasp has 4 micro adjusts, which should probably give you enough adjustment to get a decent fit. But if I were going to be keeping this one in my collection long term, I would probably be looking to wear it on something other than the bracelet. Thankfully, because it does have 22 millimeter lugs, there are a fair amount of options out there. And because the case is identical to that of the Komatsu, there are also a lot of bracelets that have already been made specifically for the Komatsu that will also be compatible with this watch. So you're gonna have a lot of options there. Shane over at Relative Time confirmed this when he got one of these in for review and paired it up with his Komatsu bracelet from Strapcode, which is a really cool look. And I think this kind of more casual, laid back, colorful look on the Mako 3 makes it suitable for pairing up with NATO straps. You'll be able to find a lot of fun, bright colors I think will work well with these watches. Or this hybrid rubber canvas strap from Strapseeker I think also looks pretty cool on it. Since black and orange is such a popular color combination, I think with this particular edition I'll have a lot of great options out there. Now let's talk a little bit about the movement inside of this watch. This watch features an automatic in-house movement built by Orient. This is the F6922. And if you're familiar with automatic watch movements, this is very similar to the Seiko NH36. 40 hours of power reserve, hacking hand winding, bi-directional winding on the rotor, a 21,600 beats per hour beat rate or 6 ticks per second, and a day date complication. The out of the factory accuracy on the Orient movement is a little bit better than the Seiko. It's rated at negative 15 seconds to plus 25 seconds per day, but the rotor movement is slightly louder on the Orient, so if that's the kind of thing that bothers you, that might be something to take into consideration. And finally, just because the Seiko NH series of movements are so insanely popular, long-term it would be easier to replace a Seiko movement than an Orient movement or to get it serviced. But Epson, which owns Orient, does issue an unbranded Orient movement, the YN55, so if you did need to replace the movement, you could get one of those and it should probably work fine. Finally, let's talk about the loom on this one, and the loom is okay. It's a little bit on the disappointing given that Orient often has pretty excellent loom, but the loom is significantly weaker than what you'd find on an Orient Komatsu. It does have a pretty good initial glow, it's fairly visible, and the longevity isn't terrible, but again, it's nothing too impressive. When I ran it through my loom score, it came up with a pretty lackluster score of 6 compared to the Komatsu's 12, putting it below the Seiko SRPE series or the Dresky X's, which don't make any claim to be a dive watch. But interestingly, there is a chronograph version of this watch, which I unboxed in a previous video and will be doing a full review of soon. On the chronograph version of the Mako 3, the loom was pretty good. So I'm not sure why the dive watch kind of suffered in that area while they were able to pump it up for the chronograph version. I had assumed that it's probably because the markers are very flat, and so they couldn't really apply a thick layer of loom in that tight, sharp space. But again, the chronograph version managed to do a much better job. Finally, let's talk about the bezel action on this watch. It's okay. It feels kind of like Seiko bezels. It's a little bit softer, a little bit more springy than you would find on maybe some other micro brands or Swiss watches. But the alignment is good and there's not any backplay, so bezel action is good, but the grip on the bezel is a little bit slippery, so it can be kind of hard to get a good handle on. Again, exactly like the Orient Mako. And that's pretty much it. For the most part, this watch shares a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses of the Mako. It's a very well-built watch by a very reputable Japanese company that has a lot of history behind them. They're one of the very few companies that is producing affordable dive watches with in-house automatic movements, and they're often seen as a great alternative to Seiko's entry-level watches, particularly the Seiko 5 Sports models, because unlike those, these watches feature a sapphire crystal and a screw-down crown and a full 200 meters of water resistance, things that Seiko will charge you a lot more for. Now, given that this is a brand new release, prices are going to be a little bit higher than your other Mako lines, probably. I got this limited edition direct from Orient at the retail price, which given the current exchange rate, which is wildly in favor of the dollar still, it comes out to about $315. Now, in the US, you can find the Mako models for around $200. And I suspect that eventually these new Mako 3s will bottom out at around that price as well on markets like Amazon and JomaShop. But for a while, they will probably be hovering closer to that $300, $350 retail price. And at that full retail price, I think they're less of an attractive option. I think when they drop down to $250 and below, they're going to be an awesome buy. But unless you're really excited to finally get your hands on a Mako with a sapphire crystal and some cool fresh colors, I would probably hold off until the price drops. Now, one other interesting thing that Orient has done is that they're not only releasing this new dive watch version of the Mako 3, they've also created a chronograph version, and this is something that is different. It is something that really jumps out of the Mako line. And I also got one of those in for review. I've done an unboxing of both of these watches already if you want a sneak peek at that, but there will be a review of that one coming up later. I think the chronograph version compares very favorably with the Seiko speed timers at about half the price. Again, this one comes in between $200 and $300 for a sapphire crystal, solar chronograph movement, great build quality, 200 meters of water resistance, and they look really cool as well. So if you're interested in seeing that review, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so that when I do drop it, you'll be able to see it. So to wrap up my final thoughts on this watch, I don't think there were a lot of surprises here. I think everybody had been waiting for a Mako 3 to come out for a long time. I guess what was a little bit surprising to me was that they basically just swapped out the dial and bezel insert on a Mako and dropped it like that. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more differentiation there, maybe seen them improve some of the things that people have complained about with the Mako, possibly a larger crown and maybe a more tapered bracelet. That would have been a much more exciting release for me. That said, I'm still excited to see Orient come out with these new dial options. And again, I think the more choices, the better. For me personally, out of all of the Mako style watches that I've seen come out, the one that I'm most interested in is the kind of Orient Ray 3 one, or the Mako 2, as I think most people are calling it. I haven't picked one of those up yet, but they look really cool. So I might wind up selling the Mako and this Mako 3 and picking up one of those instead. But let me know what you guys think about these new versions of the Mako and the Mako 3, which dial option you like the best, what you think of the different variants that are out there. Always love hearing from you guys in the comments. And if you're interested in picking up some watch themed t-shirts or hoodies, make sure you check out justthewatch.com where you can get this hoodie and a lot of other items like it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.